I thought he was going to let me go. He closed the office door, lowered his voice, and told me a secret I never expected to hear, one that rewrote how I saw my past, my job, and the man I'd worked for all these years. Before I dive in, do me a favor, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I love knowing where you are, whether it's a small town with one good diner or a big city with lights that never sleep. It was a Monday with too much coffee and not enough sunlight. The open floor hummed with printers and air vents, and that nervous keyboard tapping people do when month-end is close enough to taste. I'd been at North Point Logistics for 13 years, long enough to know when trouble walked the halls with a clipboard, and that morning I saw it in the tight whispers near the break room. Budget reviews, restructuring. A word I hate because it never feels like a puzzle you put together. It's a puzzle you throw out. I was checking a shipment tracker when I heard my name, the kind of careful Ashley, do you have a minute? That lands on your shoulders like a coat you weren't planning to wear. It was Anthony, my boss. Lowered voice. One hand on the door frame, the other holding a folder the color of old wheat. He has that steady presence, salt and pepper hair, crisp shirts, a habit of listening before he speaks. He's always been fair. Not soft, just fair. The difference matters. Sure, I said, even though my stomach did a small flip. I grabbed my notebook and followed him down the corridor. His office was neat in that masculine way. Dark wood desk with those small brass corners, a single-framed black and white photograph of the factory floor from the 70s, blinds half closed against the glare. He stepped aside to let me in first, then closed the door. The latch settled with a click that I felt in my ribs. He didn't sit right away. He looked at the blinds, then at the photo, like a man choosing how to open a conversation you can't unsay. When he finally took his chair, he rested the folder on the desk, but kept one palm on it, as if it might try to run. The silence stretched just long enough for me to count 3 of my own breaths. Ashley, he said, voice quiet. What I'm about to tell you. I want to ask for your trust, and your permission to say something personal. It was the strangest preface. Most bosses don't ask permission to talk. I nodded. You have it. He exhaled, relief or resolve. I couldn't tell, and opened the folder. Inside were papers, some brand new, crisp edges, and 2 envelopes softened by time. The top envelope was the color of tea, corners worn, my last name written in a hand I recognized before my brain caught up. Reynolds, my maiden name. The sight of it sent a small current through the room. He looked at me carefully. I think you'll know this handwriting. I did. It was my father's. I had to sit back because my body moved before I did. My father, who drove trucks across half the country and still made it home in time to fix whatever was broken. A hinge, a fence, a heart. He died when I was 23. A heart attack that happened too fast to negotiate with. I carry him with me every day, in the way I fold receipts, in how I don't waste salt, in the way I look at road maps like scriptures. Why do you have that? I asked, gentle because my throat had tightened. Anthony folded his hands. Let me come at this slowly. 30 years ago, before I came here, I was a plant supervisor in Ohio. Long winters, machines older than the men who ran them. It was a rough year, margins thin, tempers thinner. One night after a double shift, I was driving home on I-80. I blew a tire. I pulled onto the shoulder, right near a bridge. It was snowing, that powdery snow that looks pretty and hides black ice like a trick. I got out to change the tire, and I did something stupid. I misjudged the shoulder. I slipped. I went over the guardrail. The drop wasn't far, but far enough. My leg was wedged, and the snow kept falling. He smiled without humor, and then the lights of a truck came up behind me. The room seemed to narrow into his voice. I could hear the air vent, the tiny squeak of the chair across the hall. He waited until my eyes met his. "Your father pulled me back over that rail," he said. "He had no reason to stop. He was on schedule, but he stopped. He hauled me up, and then, while I was shaking and completely useless, he fixed my tire with that quiet competence I've only ever seen in men who do the job right the first time. He gave me his thermos, made me drink, then he was gone before I could get his full name. I never forgot his face, though. Not once." Something inside me unfurled and tightened at the same time. I pictured Dad in his flannel jacket, the blue one that smelled like diesel and peppermint gum. I pictured him bracing his boots on a slick shoulder and reaching for a stranger like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because to him, it was. Anthony tapped the old envelope. Months later, I ran into him again at a service station outside Toledo. I tried to press cash into his hand, tried to make it even. He wouldn't take a cent. He did hand me this letter when he realized I wouldn't let it go until I'd done something. He told me, "If you want to repay me, repay someone else. Don't make a big thing of it. Just don't forget the moment." Then he left, and that was the last time I saw him. He pushed the envelope toward me. The paper made that soft whisper on wood. I picked it up with fingers I had to will steady. The flap had been opened and resealed long ago. The adhesive had that brittle crumble that happens to old things. Inside, on a single sheet, was my father's handwriting. The words were simple, exact, like he spoke. "If you need to do something, do it for my girl someday. Her name is Ashley. She's stubborn like her mother. Don't tell her. Just do it quietly." It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. My eyes stung, so suddenly I had to press my lips together. The date in the corner startled me. 30 years flashed in 2 numbers. I looked up. Anthony's face held the careful expression of a man in a room with something fragile. "I recognized your last name on your resume the day HR forwarded it," he said. "I didn't know if you were his Ashley. I asked you questions in your interview that won't sound like much now. About Ohio, about the way your father taught you to check oil, about the road. I knew halfway through, but I wasn't sure how to handle it. He told me not to tell you. So I didn't." He swallowed. "I did something else." He turned the other papers around for me to see. New, crisp edges. A certificate with my son's college name on top. A confirmation for a training program I took my 3rd year here when the company found room in the budget. A donation acknowledgement to a little community center that paid for the after-school robotics class where my grandson first learned to tinker with circuits. My breath hitched. I've been trying to keep my promise to him," Anthony said, voice barely above the hum of the vent. Quietly. "Nothing you didn't earn. The training we funded because you deserved it. The scholarship for your son was through a company foundation, anonymous by design, and there were 12 students in that cohort. I didn't want you to feel obligated. I wanted to make sure the road rose in the places your father would have wanted it to. He saved my life. This was the closest I could get to handing the thermos back across the years." I set the letter down with both hands. You know how sometimes a memory becomes a room, and you walk back into it. I was suddenly small again, watching Dad lace his boots on the back step. I could see the shallow dents in the leather where the laces crossed. I could hear Mom calling after him not to forget his lunch. Time folded, neat as a handkerchief. "Why, tell me now." My voice came out hoarse. "After all this time?" He leaned back, and that was the first moment he looked tired to me. Not exhausted, just mortal. the way men look when they finally say what's been keeping them up. 2 reasons, he said. First, there's a decision coming for this company. I don't want to lose what makes it decent, the pensions, the promise that if you show up, you matter. I've been working on something you'll see in a minute. Second, he looked down at his hands. Second is personal. I had a doctor's appointment 2 months ago. Nothing dramatic, but there are signs I can't ignore. Early. Manageable. But it means my timeline is different than I assumed. I need to hand things off cut clean to someone who understands people more than numbers. Someone who knows the road. The words didn't feel like a cliff. They felt like a turn in a road I hadn't seen on the map. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? He smiled then. Not a performative smile. The kind that lands in the eyes before the lips. Your consent to hear the rest. And your promise to keep it to yourself until we're ready. And if you're willing, your agreement to stand next to me when we tell the others. I want you to help me shape it. Tell me, I said. I'm here. He opened the second envelope, a legal document with paragraphs that looked like they'd been ironed. An employee trust, he said. We've been profitable, and a private equity firm has been sniffing around. I said no twice. They'll come back with a bigger offer and a longer smile. I don't want to sell to someone who'll turn the building into a spreadsheet. I want to sell to the people who built the thing. I want to set up an employee-owned trust, protect the pensions, keep managerial guardrails, make sure the next 10 years don't eat the last 30. But I can't do it alone. The board will fight me unless someone who isn't me can translate this into real life. You can. You've got credibility on the floor and in the boardroom. If you say this will work for the folks in receiving, they'll listen. If you say it'll keep trucks rolling, they'll listen. My heart did another one of those flips, but this time it didn't feel like fear. It felt like a door opening onto a familiar porch. I thought of the guys in packaging who sent me an angel food cake on my 50th. I thought of the woman in payroll who keeps peppermint tea in her desk for me. I thought of my father, hands on a guardrail, choosing to stop in the snow for a stranger. You want me to help you sell the idea, I said. I want you to help me build it, he corrected softly. And when I say help, I mean lead parts of it. Draft the safety nets we'd want if we were on the floor. Write it clear. Teach me where the policy sounds good, but lives badly. I also, he hesitated, that careful pause again. I also want to ask something I can't ask as your boss unless you consent, Ashley. I want to tell you more about the health piece. Not because I need sympathy, because it will affect timing and roles. This is personal. I won't cross your boundary. The way he asked mattered. Not a man laying his burdens at my feet, expecting me to pick them up. A colleague asking if there was room at my table. You can tell me, I said. I'm okay to hear it. He nodded once, gratitude flickering across his face. Early stage Parkinson's, he said. Mild tremor in my right hand. You've probably not noticed because I hide it under a pen. I've got a good neurologist. I'm still me. I will be me for a long time. But I need to plan for the days when my energy is a finite resource. That's why I'm accelerating the trust. That's why I'm teaching more and holding less. If we do this right, no one needs to panic, and I don't have to pretend I'm invincible. The word invincible landed with that hollow ring of something we all try to be at work. My eyes traveled to his pen, lying parallel to the desk edge like always. I realized I had noticed, in some foggy way, the way he sometimes steadied a coffee cup with his left hand. I had filed it in the drawer labeled Quirk, because it felt kinder than naming it. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it, but I'm also honored you told me. Thank you, he said. I don't want this to be a secret that rots. I want it to be a fact we work with. The board doesn't know. HR doesn't know. For now, it's between us and my doctor. We'll widen that circle when the trust plan is ready. I'm asking you to step into this with me. There are moments in your 50s when you realize how many different versions of yourself you've been. The woman who worried about prom dresses, the woman who kept a spare key in the coffee can, the woman who learned to make sourdough because her grandson liked the crusts. In that office, with the blinds slatted and the well-behaved pens, I felt all those women line up behind me. I thought of Dad's letter. Don't tell her. Just do it quietly. It felt like the universe had decided quiet had done its work, and now it was time for clear speech. I'll help, I said. I'll help on both counts. We'll write this trust so a forklift driver can explain it to his mother, and we'll make sure you don't have to carry more than you should. We sat there for a second, the way people do when something big has just moved from idea to plan. He slid a clean notepad across the desk. Thick, cream paper that took ink like it was made for it. I uncapped my pen and drew a line down the middle. Okay, I said, my voice finding its braver register. 2 columns. People and process. Under people, we list who needs to know and when. Under process, we outline milestones. Legal draft, board review, employee Q&A, pension assurance. We add a 3rd column, stories. We'll need them. People remember stories more than bullet points. We tell the story of what this place is, not just what it costs. He smiled, a little amazed, like he'd set a chess piece down and the board had rearranged. This is why I asked you, Ashley. We started small, the way you build a barn, post by post. We listed names. We circled trouble spots. We wrote no jargon like a commandment. He told me the bones of the legal structure, and I translated them into plain language. He talked about valuation, and I turned it into a question. How does this guarantee Miss Lillian in accounts gets to retire when she planned to? We went back and forth like that, 2 people shaping something that might outlast both of us. At some point, he reached into the bottom drawer and took out a 2nd thermos. Steel, dented ordinary. He poured coffee into those little cup lids and pushed one toward me. I keep a spare, he said, a habit I learned on a snowy night. We both laughed, softly, because the room asked for it. I took the cup. The coffee tasted like the ones my father used to make, strong enough to stand a spoon in with the faintest hint of something sweet. We worked until the afternoon light climbed up the blinds and turned the office gold. In the middle of a sentence, I felt it, a tap on the back wall of my heart. This wasn't just about a company or a plan. It was about finishing a circle my father had drawn with his life. It was about a man keeping a promise for 3 decades without fanfare, and another man being humble enough to ask for help. It was about being 51 and discovering, to my shock, that there were still firsts left for me. The first time my past knocked on today's door and asked to come in, the first time my boss told me something he didn't have to, and the first time I let myself say yes without pretending I needed to think about it longer. When we finally stood, there was that moment of hesitation that happens after an honest conversation. How do you end it? A handshake felt too formal. A pat on the shoulder felt paternal. In the end, we just stood close, the desk between us, and shared a quiet that didn't need to be filled. Thank you for trusting me, I said. Thank you for letting me, he replied. As I reached for the old envelope again, he nodded toward it. Keep it, he said. It's yours. I slipped the letter into my notebook as carefully as I used to tuck notes into my son's lunchbox. On my way out, I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at him. He'd returned the blinds to their precise angle, the ones that keep the glare off spreadsheets, but still let you know there's weather outside. He looked smaller and larger at once, smaller in the admission he'd made, larger in the way he'd made it. The corridor air felt different as I stepped out, wider, somehow. I could hear the familiar sounds again. Honey's laugh from customer service, the squeak of the mail cart. I walked to my desk slowly. I didn't want to break the thread between the woman who'd entered that office and the woman who left it. I sat down, opened my notebook to a clean page, and wrote 3 lines. Tell the story right. Protect the people first. Return the thermos. Later that evening, I stood in my kitchen with the good light over the sink, the one I bought after the old fixture flickered like a bad idea. I made tea, then I sat at the table and read my father's letter again. The paper had the faintest scent of time. Dust and glue, and a hint of something that might have been my mother's perfume once upon a laundry day. I traced his name with my finger. I said it out loud just once. Then I took a breath like a woman who knows tomorrow has something worth waking up for. If you're watching from a big city tonight, I hope you get a quiet cab ride home. If you're watching from a town where the grocery clerk knows your birthday, I hope someone waits when you pass. And if you're watching from somewhere in between, like me, I hope you remember that you're allowed to be surprised by your own life. I thought I was going into a meeting about numbers. What I walked into was a bridge between who I've been and who I'm still allowed to become. That was the day my boss closed the door and told me a secret. It shocked me, yes, but it didn't break me. It built something. And the next morning, with a letter in my bag and a plan in my pocket, I walked back into that office ready to begin. The next morning, I woke up with that letter still resting on the table beside my bed. I'd read it 3 times before I drifted into sleep, and the words had carved themselves into me like an engraving you don't ever want to fade. I made coffee, black and strong the way my father used to, and stared at the steam rising like it was carrying pieces of my life upward to meet the day. At work, the air felt different, charged, but not in the usual way of deadlines or quotas. I carried the envelope in my bag, almost like a talisman, and when I walked through the office door, people smiled at me, nodded. They had no idea that behind those smiles, I was holding something that could change all of us. Anthony was already in his office, blinds open wider this time, letting the light spill across his desk. When I knocked, he looked up and gave me that small, steady smile. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I said, and meant it. We sat down again, our notepad from the day before still open, lines already filled with scribbles, arrows, corrections. But this time, there was something different in the air between us. It wasn't just about work. It was about carrying something bigger than numbers. It was about trust. He leaned forward. "Ashley, today's the first real step. We'll draft the framework, but more importantly, we need to figure out how to tell the story. Numbers won't move people. Stories will." I thought of Dad again, how he never gave speeches, but everyone who met him had one story they carried like a coin in their pocket. That was the answer, I realized. We had to build the trust not just with paperwork, but with moments people could hold on to. So we started weaving them. I told him about Lillian from accounts who never missed a day of work, even when her back was aching. He told me about Roger in maintenance, who kept machines running long past their life because he treated them like old friends. We wrote those names down, not as bullet points, but as anchors. Hours passed like minutes. He showed me the draft of the legal trust, and I caught myself translating line by line out loud. This clause means pensions won't be touched. This one guarantees that employees can buy in at a fair rate. He nodded, adjusting his notes, listening carefully. It was a rhythm that felt natural, 2 people filling in each other's blind spots. But then, just as we were closing the binder, he set his pen down. The tremor was there this time, clear and unhidden. He didn't cover it, didn't disguise it with a joke. He just looked at me. I'm not afraid of what's coming, he said quietly. I'm afraid of not leaving things better than I found them. That's what your father did for me. He left me better than he found me. I don't want to waste that. Something caught in my throat. You won't, I said, steady this time. We won't. That was the turning point. From that moment, it wasn't his plan with my help. It was ours. Together. By late afternoon, we had a framework solid enough to test. He suggested we try it out on one person first, someone who would give us an honest reaction. We both said the same name at the same time. Lillian.